Good evening. We are starting and we are live. So welcome to the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions. Of course, I introduced myself to you all, but I have to do it again. My name is Kimberly Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute. We're so grateful to have you here tonight. We want to take time to thank the St. Pete Young Professionals, the Clearwater Young Professionals, and the Treasure Island and Madeira Beach Young Professionals for partnering with us for this important conversation. When we have such transitioning times, when we are promoting and uplifting our young professionals, we're grateful that they took time to explain their journey, to answer questions about their trajectory, and why it matters. I think it's important for us to embrace young leaders and, of course, to embrace succession planning, which is necessary for all organizations. We have, of course, a great young elected officials panel that our moderator, Al Rochelle, will introduce to everyone. I don't want to take time to let everyone know we have some wonderful programs that remain for the year, but we'll follow up with that. And in the interim, I will introduce our esteemed moderator, Al Rochelle, who does not need an introduction, but is known in the Bay Area as being an honest, candid, and charismatic moderator. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the program. Thank you, gentlemen.
She so graciously lets me to take part in this. You know, being a retired news anchor, you do retire, but you're never really fully away from the news. Although I will tell you, I do not consume as much news as I did when I was on the air, 5 hours live every day. So doing about 21,000 interviews in my 50-year career, talked to an awful lot of people, and I love conversations, and so anytime I get a chance to do stuff with Kimberly used to be a writer and producer for us years ago at Bay News 9, and then went to law school and excelled in everything that she does, and she's been so gracious to invite me back to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of things. And I always tell everybody when we go to these debates and any kind of conversations that I am king, I have control. If it gets out of control, I will throw you out of the room. I've never had to do that yet. But usually the threat is enough to let people go, oh my God, this is really going to be a controlled conversation. But no, we're hoping to have a good conversation that's open and hopefully that we'll learn everything as much as we can. We're going to go ahead and start because Eric Arroyo from Sarasota is in the traffic, and we know how traffic goes around here. We're getting to the point we're almost like LA or Atlanta. Whenever you're in Atlanta, you better an hour and a half, and if you're in LA, at least 2.5 hours unless you can walk or ride or have your car hijacked. So, you know. Anyway, first of all, thank you so much to the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions and for us being here at the St. Pete Gibbs campus in this wonderful student union facility, if you'd like to call it that. And ironically, this was designed by my son-in-law. So it's kind of like, oh boy, this is great, it's his building. So from Wanamaker Jensen. So it's a pleasure to be in a facility that's so well used and that we're able to use it tonight for our purposes. So my job for the ISPC event is a kind of a steerer. I will steer these conversations in 2 words that you will only hear repeated this one time. Democrat and Republican will not be used the rest of the evening, period. There's no time for division, bickering, policy differences. We're here to talk with these panelists as just people. And hopefully you can tell us about your journey. We want to pick your brains a little bit. I have some questions that are not partisan one way or another, but I think we'll have a good conversation. So this is for people that are 40 years or younger. So why they invited me to be at 72, I do not know. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy not to be running for anything or running away from anything either. So each panelist, as we start the conversation, we're going to have about 5 minutes to do what I call the why part of why you're here, why you ran, and then we're going to answer some of these other questions that I'll put to you right now. You don't have to answer them in your 5 minutes, but we're going to talk about eventually the biggest surprise you had, something you weren't prepared for. Have you really been able to make a difference so far? We'll talk about people's trust in elected officials in general, and then finally with some words of encouragement on the backside. So you don't have to include those kind of things in your 5 minutes. So we're just going to start right here now with Copley Gertis from the St. Pete City Council. Ricky Floyd is also from the St. Pete City Council, and I'll give their ages. Copley is the old man at 40. I don't even remember what 40 was. There, you're right at the bar, okay. Ricky Floyd is 32, St. Pete City Council. Tyler Payne is 33, the mayor of Treasure Island. I've done a number of events with him. He's really, really good. Really enjoyed Tyler's company. Eric Arroyo is not with us. He's the one who's, the last call was on just turning off on 22nd Street, so you can figure out in your brain how long it's going to take. And when he gets here, we'll just invite him to take that last seat. And then Bernie Jacques is 36 from the Florida State Representative, District 59. Is that right? We got that right. Okay, so Copley, why don't you lead us off? Go about 5 minutes, and I'm not going to do a hard wrap, but we'll kind of keep the conversation going here. Copley, there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my why relatively was easy. I was born and raised here in St. Petersburg, and I got to see really this city grow up around me. And that was very exciting to see, both as a kid playing in the streets, playing touch football and roller skating across my streets, to really the flourishing downtown that we see today. And so when I decided to run what was now 2.5 years ago, it really was because I had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, and I wanted them to experience the same exact things that I did. An amazing place to raise a family, an amazing place to go have an amazing meal, to go to an amazing museum, to be able to play with their friends on safe streets. And so I selfishly, I just wanted those same things for my kids. And I was very blessed. I had a family that was continuously involved in our community. My mom was a teacher for 26 years and was wrestling us. I'm one of 4 boys, so we were either at a baseball park or in a swimming pool or at a soccer field. And my dad was a small business owner, an attorney here in town, and was also on city council. So I got to see him have an impact over an 8-year period of time where I was an adult. When he ran, I think I was 20. I was 25 at the time when he first ran. I thought I could fast forward that for my kids, being 3 and 2, and really try to make a difference in the city that they're going to grow up in. And so, as cliche as it sounds, as a dad, my kids are the why. My wife has to put up with it, unfortunately, but my kids really are the why, because I think this is an amazing place to grow up, and I just want it to continue to be. And I tell people around us all the time, if we can move the needle just a little bit every day, then we've done a good job. And I think my kids will grow up in an amazing place, a place that I call home and I'm going to always call home. So
Great. I knew your dad more than I knew you. Yeah,
he's cooler than me, so keep your expectations low. So
he did a great job when he was on council. Thank you so much for that information, Copley. Next is Richie Floyd from the St. Pete City Council. So we have to be careful. We can't really talk about issues because, you know, the way the laws are written about, we have 2 city council people that are here, so they can't talk about some of the things like baseball, blah, 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 blah. So we will not be talking about those, okay? So anyway, moving on right now. Richie, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been trained well in this. The first thing that you do when you get elected is they sit you in a room with a lawyer and they scare the heck out of you. So we got it. So I ran for office because, just to blurt it out, I had been involved in community organizing a lot at the state level, but at the city level as well, just in volunteer capacity. And I was just felt passionately about it. I have a lot of friends who do the same and grew up in a household where that was a pretty normal thing to do. So I had been an engineer. I worked as an electrical engineer for about 7 years, and I decided to take a little break from that. That was always my intent, to become a public school teacher. So I spent a year doing that, and that really opened my eyes to some of the problems in the city. And so having been there and seen what our students were dealing with every day, what their families were dealing with, really sort of inspired me to even double down on my activism. And around that time was when my city council seat came open. I was looking actually for other people to do it and was not successful. So that's how I ended up as the person who ran for the seat, because to be honest, I really enjoyed the work that my previous city council member did in District 8, and so wanted to make sure that there was somebody who would continue some of that and double down on a lot of the great things that she had accomplished. And so that's sort of how I ended up here. It really was not much more than that. I think a hobby of getting politically active sort of spiraled into what may or may not have been the best decision I've ever made. We'll see.
All right. Tyler is the mayor of Treasure Island. Tyler and I have done a couple of events together. Great guy, Tyler. Give me your why you're involved.
So I have just, I think, always been involved or interested in government, just from high school, college, law school. I was always involved in student government, just that allure of just making a difference and being in a leadership position that you can actually do something that you can see actual tangible change in. So I went to University of Florida for undergrad and then came back here to Stetson for law school. And then shortly after I graduated from law school, I also grew up here. I grew up in Treasure Island. My parents and my grandparents moved to Treasure Island in 1970 and bought a house there. So my dad lives in the house that he grew up in out in Treasure Island. So very similar to Copley's story, I'm one of 4 boys also. So I have very fond memories of riding around the neighborhood and on our bikes and rollerblade and all kind of stuff around the neighborhood. And my family loved, and I continue to love, how safe it is and just the sense of community that we have out on the beach. So when I graduated from law school, I moved back to Treasure Island, just down the street from my parents. And started to get involved in city government through a family friend who was the mayor at the time. He served 9 years as mayor of Treasure Island. It was his mission, or one of his missions, to get more young people involved in city government, which is really difficult to do. I mean, this was like 8 years ago, so especially at a small government out on the beach, our average demographics are a little bit older, so we don't really even have that many young people to choose from out there who are interested and willing and capable to run for office. But him knowing me and my passions and my dedication to the city and just where I grew up, he appointed me to our charter review committee. So that was something coming right out of law school. It was really interesting to dive into the one foundational document that our city runs off of and has to abide by. So that was a really interesting experience. I was subject to the Sunshine Law from that committee, so I already had an idea of what the realities of city government are, what you can and can't do, what it's like to sit in that city, the commission chambers and make decisions as a group, and have to go through a lot of the red tape that you have to deal with working in city government. So it piqued my interest enough, and I really enjoyed the experience. I think I was the youngest person on the charter review committee, and the oldest person was like another former mayor, and he was in his late 80s. So we had a very wide representation of ages on the committee, but it was really interesting to learn. We had another former commissioner on the committee, and it was a great learning experience. So from that point, I moved over into another neighborhood where I bought my first home, and shortly after I did that, the city commission seat for my district came open, and I had just finished up on the charter review committee, and had several people say, you should think about running for the commission. You just moved back, you're starting your career, this seat's open, we think you'd be great. So I went for it. The person who was vacating that seat decided to run for mayor himself, so I got to run for an open seat. Had a pretty contested or competitive election. That was a lot of fun to get out and like knock on doors of my neighbors, and I had actually just moved to that neighborhood, so for me it was meeting a lot of them for the first time and pitching them that I grew up in Treasure Island, and just because I just moved into this neighborhood doesn't mean I don't know the city. So I won that election, so I served 3 years as commissioner, and then wanted to run for mayor because, again, I saw a lack of fresh perspective and ideas, and having seen our commission over the years be on the older side, that just younger perspective, I think, was really missing, and I think Mayor Minning really saw that potential and that need. So I saw that lacking when I ran for commission, but I saw it continue to lack, and particularly at the top seat of mayor. So I ran against the incumbent, who was also in his 80s, had a very, very competitive election, a lot of we agreed that it would be a gentleman's race, but it ended up having a lot of mudslinging, not fun, but that's its own experience, is trying to rise above that fray of when you're coming up against someone like kind of spreading wrong, incorrect information about you. How do you overcome that through in a diplomatic way? So it was, my why is really just very similar to Copley's. I'm about to get married in 2 weeks, and we intend to have kids, so I want to have Treasure Island be a place that my kids can grow up and experience the same childhood that I did. And I have a heart for our community, and I want to see it developed in a responsible way. I want it to be somewhere where both tourists and tourists and residents can really enjoy quality of life and enjoy living in the city.
All right, great. Bernie Jacques, Florida State Representative, District 59. Bernie, you got it.
All right, thank you, Al, and thank you, SPC, for having us for this pretty neat forum. It's truly an honor to be here. So my why is to protect freedoms and opportunities, the same freedoms and opportunities that I had growing up in our great state. And this experience came through the lens of a first-generation American. My family and I, we came here over from Haiti when I was 7 years old. And my parents instilled in me, and me and my brothers, that in this country, you work hard, you play by the rules, have faith in God, all things are possible. And I literally had that front row seat to the American dream and saw them achieve a lot. Initially, both parents working multiple jobs each at all sorts of places. We settled in Immokalee, Florida initially, living with my uncle. They worked in the packing houses, agriculture, Circle K, you name it. But I always saw the elevation, right? So from living with aunt and uncle, we moved into a mobile home. And I thought that was great because it was a step up, and we had our own place. It was nothing glamorous. I mean, it barely had AC, but you could see the mobility. And from the mobile home to an apartment in Immokalee, which again was another step up. I remember my dad got his first car and he pulled it up, a beat up used car. But I saw the progress. We eventually moved into Naples, working class Naples, in East Naples, in a duplex, and I was thrilled. It's not quite a full house; it's half a house. It's looking good. And then parents eventually bought their first home, the same home that they live in today, all within 6 years of coming into this country. This all happened, and saw a lot of other achievements. My dad, he would go to school at night while working full time. Eventually got his bachelor's degree. And saw one of his sons become a member of the Florida legislature. I mean, it's not only that, but serve as an assistant state attorney. Got appointed by a governor to select judges. I mean, so it's an amazing sequence of life events. But the older I got, the more I realized that this was not by accident, right? The achievements we're able to accomplish in this country, there had to be policymakers in the halls of the legislature, in the halls of Congress, or city council, what have you, who made decisions to allow families like mine to rise. And so my initial interest in politics came through just a love of American history. And when you followed the figures of American history, a lot of them were political leaders. So that was the initial curiosity. But again, as I got older, I realized that this can be a calling to make sure that we protect those same freedoms and opportunities that my family had here in our great state. And I think you do so by focusing on the basics, things like public safety, education, job creation. And that's been my path. So I've gotten involved throughout college and law school and different political groups, student government. Got appointed to city council, a city board rather, in the city of Seminole. And ran for office the first time in 2018, came up short in that primary, but didn't lose my resolve and ran again in the 2022 cycle and won. And serving now. So it's truly a blessing to be here, and I intend to protect those same freedoms and opportunities that I had growing up.
Good. Well, when Eric shows up, we'll let him just jump up here on the stage. But let's get this as they say, out of the bag right to begin. I'm 72. You guys are 40 or younger. What do you young folks, you young professionals, have that we don't? Because in my lifetime, I've been in this area since 1986, I've seen enough mistakes to fill volumes. And sometimes it's said that with age comes wisdom, and you don't repeat the same mistakes. But what do you as young professionals bring that we oldsters and an 80-year-old, besides the fact that we have to talk more about what we eat and when we went to the bathroom and all these other things you do when you get old? I know it's very mundane, but that's kind of the way it works. So what do you offer because you're younger? Eric, come on in. We're fine. We just got started. So we'll get you seated there and let you catch your breath. And we have just gone through the first part where the folks here just told us about, you go right up there, we'll sit right next to Bernie. There you go. And the question you'll be answering when you catch your breath is basically your why. And you got about, we'll talk for about 5 minutes. We're not keeping a clock on this or anything, Eric. So basically, Eric Arroyo is on the Sarasota City Commission. It should be on. Yep. Okay, it's on. So is it on? Click the button. There you go. You got it. Yeah. So just tell us the why. Why did you decide to run for office?
I was actually very angry that I saw that all the money was being allocated to the downtown, which is where the more affluent neighborhoods are, and of course the high rises, and I live towards the edge of town, and there was less art, there was less money being allocated, there was, everything was just worse, and so I went in there to make sure that my neighborhoods were represented.
Was this your first office?
Yes.
And people sometimes say, why were you crazy enough to run for a public office?
Yeah, no, I ask myself that every single day.
Okay, that's short. You had up to 5 minutes to talk about this, but this is fine. This is fine. What did your family think about you doing all this?
Which part of the family?
Oh, it was divided, huh?
You have to be very specific. No, my mom lives in town in Sarasota. That's where I'm late, because the traffic in Manatee County, not Sarasota County. The traffic in Manatee is in between us, and that was terrible. So anybody from Manatee here? Good. They're probably still in traffic, honestly.
We've all driven it, so we know that.
No, my family, they're supportive. Everybody was supportive, and I'm Hispanic. I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I'm the first to graduate high school in my family, and have been in Sarasota since high school. And so it was a big deal, the fact that I was elected in Sarasota as not only the youngest ever elected, but also the first Hispanic and or Spanish speaking. I don't know. And so everybody's happy. It's a good time.
Great. And you're 33.
33 years old.
Okay, yeah, okay. So the question I had asked the panel, and you don't all have to chip in on this, but you certainly can. What do you young professionals have that we oldsters don't?
You first.
Yeah.
Pressure on me.
Seriously.
I mean, the simple answer is I don't think we have anything better. I just think it's different. Our perspective is different, and I think that's really it. It's a different lens to look through. Me being 40, first half of my childhood was really no internet. Second half of my childhood was the dawn of the internet. Now we live in like an internet-driven society. Richie's probably always had the internet. You're so young, but I just think it's a different perspective. Going back to what my dad told me not to do this. He told me to wait. And what I liked about doing it now was that I still was a little bit brash to make some of those mistakes. Hopefully different ones, so we're learning a different lesson. But I still had enough confidence that the lens in which I was raised, in which I grew up, was just a little bit different than the ones that had come before me on council in those seats. And so I'm not sure that we have anything better. In fact, you probably know far more. The older people on commission probably know far more. We just see it a little differently. And I think that brings that extra lens to look through, which I think is impactfully important, at least on our council.
The rest of you kind of agree with that? Just different? No. Richie, okay?
No, actually. So I'll just say, not that I don't agree. Like, obviously, that's true. Like, there's a little different. But I would just emphasize that I don't know that there's any difference between an older person and a younger person in general. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I mean, yes, we view the world a little differently from growing up with the internet. But yeah, I would just emphasize a little bit more strongly, like, I don't think that there's anything that I have or anybody else up here has that you couldn't have as well. You know, I mean, maybe we might stay up a little later or something. I don't know,
No.
but no, I go to bed early and I get up late too. So, but no. But yeah, I think it just depends on your perspective totally. I'm not one for, generational divides or anything. Actually, a lot of the people that I do community organizing with, a lot of my friends, they're all a lot older than I am. And so I really like to emphasize, no matter what anyone's age is, that they can contribute.
Do you feel that maybe in some ways, because you're young, that maybe you have to drive your point home a little bit stronger and have to do a little bit more convincing for us old folks who, there's two things about being young and being old. They're the same thing. When you're young, you think you know it all. When you're old, you think you know it all, but you know you don't. So is it harder to convince older people, the voters, to vote for you, or to get the younger voters excited about voting for you? Anybody?
I still want to answer your other question.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple questions in there. I mean, I think I kind of disagree. I think we think about things in a different lens. We do have less experience in society, but I think I personally, I'll just speak from my commission, I certainly I'm in the minority quite often, even though I was elected by the entire city, and each one of them was only elected by each one of their districts. But just that age difference, I think, brings a different lens. Like Copley was saying, that you see the city in, we're a lot less resistant to change. So things that have always been that way, I hate that answer. Mm-hmm. Why are we doing this? Because we've always done it that way. I don't think that's an appropriate answer to that question. You have to look at everything that the city's doing in a fresh lens, and in today's world, things that we set up, ordinances that were passed in the 70s or the 80s, like the world has changed a lot since then, and we need to look at things a different way. So I'm also looking towards the future of Treasure Island in 30 years from now, 40 years from now, when a lot of these people aren't, frankly, going to be here anymore.
That's true.
And
That's
my
true.
kids are going to be living here. So I have a more vested interest in making sure that the decisions I'm making are future-based and not just current time-based. So a decision on a development in our downtown area that might cause some traffic issues or cause some heartburn with the restaurants and shops that people have always shopped at for the last 30 years, I am looking to the future and making sure that Treasure Island is sustainable and resilient in the future, that we're actually going to have a city to be there in 30, 40 years that's not going to be underwater. So these are things that, like with sea level rise and just preparing for bigger storms or just storms in general, like Treasure Island could have been devastated if Idalia had hit closer to here. We had 6 inches to a foot of flooding in a lot of the homes down in Treasure Island or in Sunset Beach. So that's something that I'm always thinking about, is what are we doing as a city to prepare for the future? It's gonna be difficult to get there, but like we're gonna have to raise roads, raise seawalls, raise properties in between, build buildings up higher, because flooding is happening. So I think it is difficult to convince people of that we need to be thinking out that far, because
nobody
so
likes
many
to
people
use
are
today's
just
dollars to pay for tomorrow's problems, do
yeah.
they? Bernie?
So-
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think one is better than the other. I will say, yeah, it is a different perspective. In the sense, so when you think about how you get elected, you go to where the votes are. And a lot of what they call the super voters, your reliable voters, they're often older. In my district, when I'm campaigning to the quote-unquote super voters, it's people like 55 and up a lot of times. And so there's a whole age gap that's missing and the folks that you're talking to sometimes, because you're going to where the votes are, but there's a lot of other people these decisions are going to impact. So what it helps is that when you have an individual from a different age group, so even though you're hearing more so from older individuals, I still live within my generation. That's who I socialize with and so forth. So I'm able to bring that perspective. that I didn't necessarily hear from the bulk of the active voters. And there are voters out there that just may not be as active, and they're just, maybe they don't even vote, but they're still constituents. But I make sure that in my social circles that I stay in touch with people within my generation, and I can still bring that perspective, even though they're not the people showing up to the town halls. They're not the people that are showing up on the list, tagged as super voters. And so I think it's beneficial in that sense. And also, just building off Tyler's point about the future, I think my older colleagues see the future as well, in the sense that they have children and grandchildren, so they want to leave it a better place for them. But it might be a little different when you have to live in that future as well, right? So when I'm imagining the policies, I picture myself there. I'm going to be there. And also as a policymaker, is that if we don't get it right, not only am I going to be there, but I'm going to have to answer for it, because that was part of the decision making. I will live with the consequences as a policymaker at that time, when decisions could have been made, and here I am in my later years. And so it gives me a sense of urgency to get it right, because I'm going to be living under those policies and have to answer for them as well.
Yeah. Eric?
I don't think there's a blanket statement that's correct about generationally, but I think in general you can make some accurate assumptions. For example, the priorities are different. People who are of an older generation would like the stability of not having things built next to them, right? They're concerned about noise downtown. They're concerned about traffic. They're concerned about the stability of where they are, right? So normally you would find someone that just worked their whole lives to buy this nice condo overlooking the water. They're probably going to be against someone building another condo that is near the water or blocking their view. Whereas I think younger elected officials may be, like has been mentioned, more forward-thinking, right? What is the community that I would like for myself and my family and my kids? We talk about younger individuals may have friends that are in the service industry or they're working all the time, and they understand the troubles of having to drive from out of town to work somewhere. And maybe workforce housing would be a priority. Maybe economic activity, bringing the fun places to your downtown, may be a priority. Whereas that might completely be in contrast to what someone else may be in favor of. Maybe someone that's older doesn't want them. I know people in my town, they move downtown, literally right next to the Gator Club, which is like the oldest bar that we have. They move right next to it, and they are now complaining about the Gator Club because they have music. I mean, literally, like you can't make this up. You can't just move somewhere and then shut the door behind you. Like people are going to continue to go to these places, and you can't just move downtown and shut it down. So there are some philosophical differences, I feel, and some of them may be age-related, like generationally divided, but for the most part, it's not a blanket statement that applies across the board.
Okay, this next one is, for better or for worse, the word compromise is considered to be a dirty word these days. It's become that. I don't know how that happened. Maybe some people say talk radio. There are a lot of, maybe newspaper editorials, maybe just that the society is a lot more volatile. And Eric, just so you know, we are not mentioning the D and the R word in it, so we'll have that straight. But, so how do you balance compromise and principle? Compromise versus principle. Because I think oftentimes people use my principle as an excuse not to compromise. Where do you draw the line? No, just anybody can say. Okay, yeah.
Well, you have to go in knowing what your principles are, right? Your fundamental beliefs, things that you will die on the hill for. It doesn't matter if you're in the minority, you take this vote, you're willing to lose an election over it, right? So there's certain things that you just can't get me to vote for, and I'll gladly lose an election over it. So every elected official has to know what that is and what these things are, and that you don't budge. So it's good to be principled. Where there is common ground, I mean, where interests align and they overlap, I think it's always good to work with one another. 2 of the bills that I passed were done with prime co-sponsors of the opposing party, right? And so, you just have to know when your interests align and go forward. But also, sometimes people think some elected officials are being rigid, especially for me. When I serve in a partisan office, and And that has certain implications as well. So in certain districts, lean more one way over the other.
Right.
And so sometimes it comes as just a response to your actual voters, right? So if someone's not compromising, quote unquote compromising, maybe they're just being responsive to the people back home in their districts that elected them. And so you have to have a fidelity to that as well. That also has to play a part in the analysis, because people sent you to Tallahassee, wherever, to do a specific thing, or certain things align with a certain viewpoint. And so do you violate that as well, right? So that's also part of the, and if those two things are not violated, my personal principles and that of my constituents who sent me to Tallahassee, then let's play ball and let's work together.
Okay, anybody else? I can use another, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what I love about being in a city elected office is that our offices are nonpartisan, and particularly in smaller cities, they truly are nonpartisan. I don't even know what the party of any of my colleagues are up on the dais, and I don't want to know, because we don't talk about, there aren't any partisan issues at the city government, at least for us. I mean, whether you pave a pothole or not is kind of not a R or D issue. So I enjoy that, and I think it does foster more compromise and understanding at the city level, at least between the elected officials. We have, our votes are constantly in flux. Like, there is no minority or majority on our city commission. It is down to each individual person has their own opinions. They represent their own district, and they vote how their constituents want them to vote, or what they think is the general guidance from the people that they represent. So but unfortunately, I am seeing that the general partisan divide in the country right now really is fostering this like distrust in government, and it's trickling down all the way from the federal government down to local government, unfortunately. Like, I'm one of the things I fight constantly is just misinformation. People that are engaged and want to know what's going on in the city government, but then ask their friend what's going on, and they take that at truth and face value, and then they take to Facebook or Nextdoor and just start ranting about things that aren't even accurate. So I think, back to the last question, another thing that does differentiate me from my colleagues on my commission is I'm extremely accessible. Like, you can message me on Facebook, Instagram, through my city email, my city cell phone's there. It's always charged, always on me. So I pride myself on being always accessible, but there's a lot of people that won't even bother reaching out to me or before they start talking about things online. So I think it's frustrating to see that kind of trickling down the partisan all the way down to local government, because I do feel like the actual people that are elected are much more collaborative than we see at the state or the federal
Anybody else
level.
in this question? We can move. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's on.
I always say in our commission meetings that a difference in opinion doesn't necessarily mean a difference in principle, right? So I think if there's enough of a level of trust where we can agree that we're all doing what we think is best for the common good, I think there are ways to compromise. Some people will vote against things all day. I know people that they'll try to compromise and then vote against something. For example, if we're passing some initiative, they'll say, how about we tweak it this way, and then tweak it here, and they'll try to break it down and then still vote against it. But for the most part, everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's make this small tweak. Let's have a sunset provision where we bring it back. And it kind of reminds me of that quote by Ronald Reagan, right? He's like, look, if I can get 80% of what I want, I would do it 100% of the time. Go get 80% and then go for the 20% later. Mm-hmm. So compromise, I think, it's needed. Local government is nonpartisan, and we like that because there is no left or right way of solving traffic or these other issues. And it needs to, but the higher up you go, the more partisan and divisive it is. And I mean, look at what's happening up in Washington right now.
We don't mention that town. Up there, okay? And we're going to come back to more of this distrust thing a little bit later. So here's another one. So what was the biggest surprise, something maybe you didn't expect or weren't prepared for when you ran for office? And this one I want to get from each one of you. A surprise, something that you know, and yeah, I want each one of you to say, give yourself, think about it, something that surprised you, something you did not expect when you ran for office, and this can be both good and it can also be bad. Because I know what I would say in my mind, but I'm a journalist. Whoops, I better be careful about that because sometimes journalists don't get things right too. But I'm opinionated as well, now that I'm not on the air. Right.
Well, my answer is not that exciting because I had a little bit of a cheat code because my dad was in the seat for 8 years. So,
Okay.
you know, I watched that for 8 years, and then I had 7 months of here's what you're going to see, here's what you're not going to like, here's what you're going to like. But I would say the biggest surprise is sometimes the lack of compromise was the biggest surprise. When I watched city council in the city of St. Petersburg in my 20s and early 30s, there was good discourse and compromise. And I was surprised on some votes, not all, because I actually think we still do a pretty good job of that. But on some votes, I was surprised with the lack of it. I was not surprised with the amount of reading. You know, we probably average 1,000, 1,500 pages a week or something like that. But sometimes the lack of compromise surprised me because of being a small government, nonpartisan. That was a little surprising.
Okay, Richie?
Yeah, so I would actually touch on something that Tyler mentioned, which is the amount of misinformation that gets out in the community. You see some of it when you are watching city council meetings or when you attend them as a private citizen, but when you're there every week and then you have people coming like on issues that you find completely uncontroversial, and they show up and they've got 18 reasons why this is the worst thing that could ever happen, and 17 of them are fabricated from thin air. It's a little surprising. Yeah, so that's probably been the biggest thing. And I don't think people are ill-meaning at all. I think that they can just get emotional about maybe things are changing in their area and they don't want to see that. And then it's very easy once they're operating from an emotional place to assume the worst or think that we're not accessible or think that we're not looking out for them. And maybe, again, they hear from someone else something that's maybe not even really related, and they just take it and run with it. It's been surprising, like, the amount of that. Now, I think we do a good job of explaining, like, no, that's not the case. And I think when people are willing to listen, it's very easy to, sort of show them what information we're using to make the decision. But it has been eye-opening because I think, local elected officials are really, I guess we are accessible. You can come to the meetings. They're right down the street from your house. It's been surprising how much you sometimes get pushback on things you would have never guessed. And a lot of times it's based on misinformation.
Yeah. Tyler, same thing?
Definitely, that's one of the things that is certainly surprising and difficult to overcome, because once that information's out there, it's out there. You get the toothpaste is out of the tube. You can't put it back in, and to go up against all the misinformation would be a full-time job. Like if I was just on Facebook constantly correcting people, like I wouldn't have a life, and certainly wouldn't have time to do my real full-time job that I actually get paid for. But I think for me, I'm going to brag on my city. I was surprised at how well our staff actually does run the city. I think from the outside, before you are on the inside and really see how the sausage is made, you just assume the worst. And I've been in the situation that I now find so annoying, where you just think you understand from the outside and you think you have all these opinions, but until you've done the homework and actually have read through all the reading that you have for every commission meeting, the big massive binder, you don't have enough information to make an accurate conclusion. So for me, some of the things I even ran on the first time I ran for city commission, I'm like, oh my gosh, the city spends so much money on all these studies. Like, why are we wasting so much time on all these studies? Can't we just have our staff do it in-house? And as a business person, I know that you have a finite amount of people, time, and resources and capacity. So coming in and actually seeing what everybody does on the staff, and that these things are things that we're trying to plan for in the future and make a really educated decision on, that we might not have the staff capacity to do those things, and they are worth the money that we're spending. So I was surprised at just how well things were and how I was a little wrong being on the outside.
Right. Bernie?
Yeah, one of the things I was surprised about is how influential a state representative is as far as addressing ordinary people's issues, like the constituent issues. And it's just outside of Tallahassee, it had nothing to do with legislation, but somebody will call the office, and just our office calling or me calling, and things get resolved pretty quickly. So it could be anything from, a kid, a parent has a kid who was dropped on Medicaid but needs to get back into kid care. It could be a situation where Duke Energy was going to cut a tree branch off a tree that's very sentimental to the constituent, and they said, well, we need to do for the power lines or whatever, but we were able to intervene and came to a resolution that all people were happy about. Or I recall we had a whole subdivision of folks who were very upset about a particular home in their neighborhood that turned into an Airbnb, and it was out of control, parties at all hours of the night, and we were able to just call the representative of Airbnb and get it resolved, and they were very pleased. So I didn't know that going in, that just being a state representative, people take your calls and address certain things, and the thing is, a lot of people don't realize that, right? Ordinary people don't know that, and that's why I make sure to be as accessible as possible and be as involved, still do door-to-door, do the town halls, to let people know that I can be of assistance. We can't solve everything, but you'd be surprised the amount of things that your state representative can achieve by just calling a state agency or even a private company and resolving issues. And so the tragedy again is the lack of knowledge of that, because ordinary people just are not always plugged in, and so we need to make that known and get people more politically engaged, and to really use a representative and that aspect as well, constituent services, not just on legislative matters.
It kind of reminds me, when I was an anchor at Bay News 9, I would get calls that were accidentally routed to me from people complaining, well, you're the news anchor on Bay News 9, my cable doesn't work. And I usually told them very softly, said, well, I don't handle that, but do me a favor, just turn off your router, turn off your TV, wait a minute, turn it back on, and I'll bet it works. And 90% of the time, that worked. So they thought because I was on TV, I had some kind of influence, but I didn't. Eric, the same question to you. Any surprises?
So I was surprised at how slow everything moves in government. And by the way, it's meant to be that way, so you don't have someone coming in and changing everything up. So that there are so many steps that I started things 2 years ago, and now it's coming in front of the commission. Secondly, the inherent, the amount of influence that you have merely because of the position, like Bernie was saying, was tremendous, because you could just call someone, a representative from an agency, and be able to negotiate things just by virtue of having that network. So I was very surprised that elected officials, lack of ability to actually move things along quickly on the actual policy side and on the execution of ideas. And I was very surprised at their inherent ability to call people up and just make things happen. And it's interesting. I think the most successful elected officials, the greatest quality they can have is to get buy-in for an idea. Because if you are gone in a couple years, and staff, you need to make sure that there's enough buy-in from the people that are running the city that they continue your idea along after. Because in reality, if you don't have the buy-in from the people that work in these cities, they just wait you out. or they, and after you're gone, they don't prioritize these things. So I think the most, you go up to Tallahassee, and I think the most powerful person in your office is that like mid-level like staffer that's been there and knows the entire ins and outs of that system because they know how to like get things through the process. I think that was surprising to me.
Okay. Now let's go back to something that we were starting to talk about. Recent polls suggest the American people are losing confidence in elected officials or our process of governing in this country, as high as 70%, according to the Real Clear Politics poll that was taken about a week ago. Do you see that in your office and when you run into people? And if there is this distrust and frustration that may come from the way the government is working or not working, depending upon your point of view in Washington, how can you help restore confidence that local government or state government isn't stuck with those same kind of problems? Or are we? Eric, we'll start with you and come this way.
I can start. I think it's different for local politics, very different from Washington or whatever you go, up there.
Up there, yeah.
Right? Because they did a study at the University of Pennsylvania, and they found that, for the most part, since the 1960s, the votes are not going in favor of the people. They're not. So without addressing that, they also did a poll and talked about the most trusted institutions in government. The most distrusted elected officials are in Congress. The most trusted elected officials in the entire realm of politics, mayors. Mayors are the most trusted. So I think the closer you get to local government, the more trust there is because, I mean, literally every vote you're taking is probably impacting everybody like within 3 miles of you, and they can just come to City Hall, yell at you, text you. There's that greater level of trust and connection, more so than at the national level.
Yeah, Bernie?
I think it's warranted when it comes to the national level. I don't really get that sense, at least from my constituents, that there's a distrust in state government. I know there's criticisms out there. To the extent that I hear criticism, it's more from a disagreement posture, maybe a partisan difference, where they're on the other side and they don't feel that the policies that they want is being advanced. But I don't think structurally. There's something awry. That's not what I sense, at least from my constituents. But to the extent that there is that, I make myself to be very accessible. And so if there is a perceived issue with the system, I don't want it to be geared or steered towards my office, right? I want to be the exception to the rule, so to speak, where you can say all you want about this, that, or the other, but the office of Bernie Jacques is always going to be responsive and accessible to the constituents. So you have to control what you can control, and hopefully be an example to others, and that will bring faith into the institutions.
Right. Tyler?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly, local government is certainly more trusted than up there, but I am seeing it, like I mentioned, I am seeing it trickle down to the local level. I mean, just people that will call and, like I was saying, haven't researched anything, but just from the nature of it being something that the government is trying to do, they assume that it's bad. We just had a conversation about some special assessments and implementing rules on how we implement special assessments, and the amount of people that came out and emailed me on the day of the vote and that had minimal information and were like, vote no, the government's just trying to get a way that you can tax us more and get more money for the city to spend on a new fire station. It's stupid, it's crazy, it's a bad idea. I'm like, well, that's not true at all. And it feels like it is just for the fact of us being the government. They assume that something is awry. So I've maybe had a little bit different experience, and maybe it's a small group of people that I'm getting that from, but I think it's something to watch and something to, you just have to be more accessible, and that's what I tell everyone is get to know, before you assume why I'm voting a certain way, just come ask me why I'm voting that way, ask me my opinion. get dinner with me, grab a drink, coffee, like,
Sure.
and just get to know me as a person before you just automatically don't trust me because I'm an elected official.
Yeah, Richie?
Yeah, I would say, you know, sometimes it's hard myself to continue to have faith in our institutions lately. I struggle with it. But I think being a local elected official really does give you some optimism because you see that you're able to connect with people. I'll just mention something that happens quite often, I'm sure to everyone here, is you get an email from someone who's really angry about something and it's your fault. You know, at first you're like kind of like taken aback by it the first time it happens. But one thing that I've come to find is that you just respond to that email and say like, hey, I understand your frustration. Here's why the decision was made the way that it was. And 9 out of 10 times they respond and they're like, thank you so much for giving us that information. Like, maybe they didn't know, maybe they don't agree with you at all, but they're really grateful that you just responded. And so that usually breathes some life back into you and makes you feel a lot better.
Yeah, Copley?
Yeah, not to belabor the point, but the accessibility really is, I think, the turning point for trust. I mean, in my office, we've got an open door policy. If you want a meeting or if you want a Zoom call or if you want a phone call, you get it. Until you're disrespectful to city staff, you can be mad at me all you want. I'm okay with that. That's what I signed up for. But as long as you're not disrespectful to our staff, we got an open door policy, whether we agree or we don't. Come on in, let's talk about it. You want to get on the phone, I'm happy to do that too. I think that's, and being transparent and honest with those people too about why you did make a decision and what was your reasons and what was your thought process and how much time. I think a lot of people don't realize how much time you spend on a decision. Yeah. You know, we've probably had 4 or 5 votes in the last 3 months that I'm probably in the 100 hours of research and time spent on reading and things like that. So I think when people hear that, they at least see the different perspective if you're on opposite ends of the decision. But the accessibility is, I think, what makes it a very different game than national politics.
Now, we're wrapping up our program right now, but just in a yes or no, and I know this is going to sound stupid the way I asked the question, but has it been worth it for all of you? Yes? Yeah?
I think unequivocally for me.
Yes.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Everybody? You'd do it again? Well, that's
yes.
Yes.
Well, we certainly appreciate the time that you spent with us this evening because I think this has been good. And one of the things that I will bring up about Bill Young, because I am old enough that I interviewed on many occasions, and one of the things that he did that was so remarkable was the art of compromise. He was so good at it. Some people call it schmoozing. I don't know what word you want to use for it, but he probably brought more money back. I won't say probably. Up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, he brought more money back to the state of Florida, and particularly to this area, than probably any other congressman has in the past, or maybe even will be in the future. But he always did it by being friendly and having open conversations. And if you ever went to a party with him, whether it was up in Washington or here, he knew everybody, and everybody knew him. And that's one thing that the Strategic Policy Institute for Solutions, that's what we're all about. And if you're watching this right now, I'm going to invite Kimberly to come back up. But I hope you find these kind of programs intriguing and informative and helpful, and always have kind of a positive spin, because I know that's why I enjoy doing, because I want to learn something so that I don't make mistakes, that I learn to be a better person, and that we can talk about these policies. And yeah, we may have differences, but at the end of the day, we're all working for the betterment of our children, our grandchildren, and our society, because isn't that what we should all be doing with our lives? Kimberly?
I just want to echo thank you. Thank you. A round of applause for our panel. What you all are doing is not easy, and we honor that, because we have to have a good space for us to live and breathe. And right now, the Bay Area is the it space, it appears, around the globe. So what you all are doing is really, truly planting seeds for future generations and people who want to come and join us as we are. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for coming this evening. I know it's late. We appreciate you coming during the week and having these most important conversations. And finally, to our virtual audience and to those who will watch later, please let us know what we can do better to make sure that you are invited into these conversations. As Elle said, this is the 10th year of Congressman Young and the Institute. We take it so seriously. I want to take time to thank our team who works hard about these thoughtful conversations and bringing people that they know will be responsive to the questions and be respectful of the space. So we would like to, again, invite you all to join us, to give us your feedback, and to share who we are as a platform. We have 2 programs coming up. One is the Grand Debate. It'll be among 4 colleges, so we are excited to have it in person at our Seminole campus, the beautiful Digitorium. We hope that you will come to see the students compete. They're competing for $1,200, so they're very excited about that. And then we also are working on a reflection piece for Congressman Young. When that's done, of course, we'll invite the public to see. So thank you again for your time, and have a blessed night.